everyone, and welcome to this latest installment of our CMO Peer Talks. We're really excited for today because it's going to be all about our franchise customer experience conference that all of us just came back from in Atlanta last week. So we're going to talk about the highlights that we enjoyed, the key learnings that we took away with, and I'm excited to be joined by a fabulous panel today. So let's dive into some introductions. So I'm sure you're tired of me already. My name is Raquel Sims, and I'm actually the host of CMO Peer Talks. I am excited to be here to run through the panel today and moderate. And I'm also, for background, the head of our customer success department at Promo Republic. Then we have Vanessa Conde. How are you, Vanessa?
I'm well. How are you?
Yeah, great. Thank you for asking. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience at Trend Group?
Sure. I am a 20-plus-year-old marketing executive. I feel like I'm dating myself. Originally from New York. I've been in Miami now for about 18 years. And at Trend Group, I'm the Senior Vice President of Global Marketing. And Trend Group RockSolid Granit, for those who don't know, is a company that is vertically integrated. They manufacture their own proprietary engineered stone and mosaic glass, and they sell, fabricate, and install it depending on where the organization is. So we work B2C, where we sell that product to architects and interior designers in the commercial space. And we also sell it through our franchise system that we have in the United States and in the UK, so that they can use our product to do home remodeling services for their customers in their local markets.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing. And moving over to Amanda Maquet. How are you today?
Good, good. I won't ask you how you are since Vanessa just did. I am Amanda Maquet. I'm the marketing director at Moran Family of Brands. We're in the automotive space, so we have 6 different concepts. Mr. Transmission, Milex Complete Auto Care. So we do transmission repair and general maintenance, oil changes to engine repair. And then we're also in the window tinting space with Turbo Tint. We have about 120 plus locations. Actually just signed about 5 more locations just last week for our Turbo Tint, which is exciting. So we're really growing on our tint side. And we work both with B2B and B2C with our franchisees. They work with dealerships or, other businesses on referrals, and then obviously with customers as well coming in their door.
Very cool. I come from a car dealer family, so I'm sure we have some overlap.
Yeah.
Well, excellent. So now that everyone has met our panel, I'm really excited to have both Vanessa and Amanda here. Like we said, we just came back from IFA's Franchise Customer Experience Conference. So today's all about the highs, the lows, the learnings. And it was really great to reconnect with everyone, number one, in person, because I know these conferences have been remote for quite some time. But also just to kind of get back to the basics. That was really my takeaway from listening to the panels and the roundtables about, the customer at the end of the day, because that's exactly what we were here for. So to open up our conversation today, I wanted to kind of learn your top takeaways when we're talking about approaching different types of customers, because in the home services space as well as automotive space, in your experiences, those are 2 different customers profiles that you have. So I'd love to know your key takeaways in general, as well as diving in further into, figuring out what that secret is to build that successful relationship with your franchisees and in turn the customer. Vanessa, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, sure. So I agree. I think it was great to get back together. The conference for me was refreshing. There were some people that I hadn't seen in a long time and were like, wow, we saw your name on the list, Vanessa Conde. We couldn't believe it. We didn't know what had happened to you, as if I, had died. It's great. It's like, here she is again. And so that was really fun. And And you're right. So it's nice to get back to brass tacks and listen to the basics, a lot of what we already know, right? But then the other part about it, there were some new takeaways that I learned. And the other more important thing for me was getting to hear people talk about what they're going through, some of the challenges, some of the wins, some of the ways they're implementing their tactics for themselves as a franchisor and for franchisees. That made me feel like, wow, I'm not in this alone. Like, yes, I can relate. This is happening to me too. And it's not just me. Woof. Good to know. So that was a really good takeaway for me. It's like, here we are, we're all back at it. Some of the other things that I thought were great was there was a panel, and I have my little cheat sheets here, that was moderated by Josh Emmington of Martech, and they really focused on the journey maps, the customer journey map. And I mean, it was kind of like a more evolved way of looking at what we've typically done in marketing for, whatever, in my case, almost 30 years, where you give a personality to this particular audience or this customer, so you can identify what the trigger points are for them, and what their pain points are and how your product can address that. And so this kind of took it to another level. And I thought it was really great the way they kind of took you through the exercise of not just giving the customer a name, but a personality name that really helped identify who they are, what they like, how they go through their journey, what are all the touch points that that they could have throughout the course of that journey. And especially in today's day and age where technology is always evolving, it seems like they showed a case study of a brand I won't name, but that had you couldn't even just see what was on their map because there were just so many different touch points. It's so convoluted in some cases, and there's so many layers. And this exercise was about taking some more simplified approach, stripping away some of the excess, and really going on that journey with the customer and clearly identifying some clear touch points that you can identify and implement and work around and strategize around, so that you can understand who they are and how they go through their lives, right? And then from that learning, understand how to implement the strategies and the processes and the tactics to get in front of them, so that you get brand awareness going and hopefully some sort of brand loyalty or engagement. So for me, that was one of the big ones. I mean, there were many good things that I experienced. The media session was really good too, and talking about research and just test. Integrated marketing on the local level, it can be so complicated. It can also be very simple depending on where you are in the world and your market. Some markets still rely on traditional things that are simple, a flyer, a print ad, maybe some TV and some radio. I think we can't get away from digital no matter where you are, but we have some slower adopters in my particular system with that, depending on where they are. But the idea is you have to keep trying and you have to keep testing. And sometimes there's no one magic pill across the system that works for everyone. So it's really about working with your franchisees to help them learn that secret sauce in their market and that right mix, and then helping them understand that despite the fact they may have honed down on a mix, that they have to keep testing and trying other things. All right.
No, I agree with that. I think multiple speakers were alluding to the customer journey and testing throughout, whichever aspects of the marketing funnel they were speaking to. So I think that's a really important point and important takeaway. Amanda, how was, your conference and your key takeaways?
Yeah, definitely. I loved that marketing summit, and that was with Martech, and then Goldfish Swim School. And I loved that exercise that they put you through, because I think as marketers, we always look at, about 5 years ago, we took all of our data from Facebook Insights and paired it with our point of sale system, and then even used some third-party data to kind of create our customer, persona in a way. But I loved what Vanessa said, they paired it with their personality and what do they do? What type of school do their children go to? Do they go to public school? Do they go to private school? Really starting to step outside of the box and think of what are some of these activities that your customer persona goes through. So that way there are different touch points that you can learn to market to them. I think there's at times we forget, hey, there are other avenues other than digital to reach that customer. So I loved that aspect with it. And, you know, that's where they even brought up analyzing your website and going through your UX and data. And I loved that too, because again, it's your customers are visiting it, and that is your data. So might as well use your data to your advantage. And that was something that I ultimately loved. That takeaway from the conference was, it was a great exercise. It really helped you recommit to your customer persona, as well as, you know, think of those things of outside the box of, hey, we never thought about approaching it this way. And with our franchisees, while we have our nationwide customer persona, and it does, you know, shift and change when it goes to the local level, it really helps, I think, marketers educate their franchisees on how their markets can be different for their local persona and how they should market to their customers in their local market.
The other thing I thought was great was when you look at the customer as a personality, and you give her or him a name and start fleshing out who they are, you're also giving yourself an opportunity to look at, well, now that I know who this person is, right? How can I make them a brand ambassador? And how do I get them to be, kind of help us develop this referral program? Because that was one of the takeaways too. We actually used at our little round table in that session our brand. I was there with my vice president of digital marketing. So we used our brand as the example to build this customer persona around. And referrals is a big lead generator for our franchisees. And we determined, after listening to some of the session, you know, we have to look at our referral program again and give it a little bit more of a punch, right? Give it some wow factor, but maybe look at our customer the way they're looking at a customer here with the personality, and see how we can touch her, because in our case, it's mostly women, right? They're the decision makers in home remodeling, in a way that's going to make her excited about the service and our product, and get her to tell her friends in a big way, right? And refer us. So that was another key takeaway. We kind of got back home and said, okay, we have to look at our referral program and figure out how we make this customer a personality and how we make her our brand ambassador for a referral program.
Absolutely. That's a really great point. And I think the commonality here is that the defining your ideal customer persona, giving it a personality, and actually diving into our second question of the day, mapping the customer journey, is really what makes the fundamentals so successful. Because once you understand who you're ideally selling to and the ideal journey that they go on, the rest of those pieces fall into place. So we did touch upon this a little bit in the opening today, just because this was such an instrumental experience for all of us at the conference. This is the part that stood out to us the most and gave us, you know, those wheels turning on, hey, I need to take this back. And Z-Bart, a franchise that has actually been on the CMO Peer Talks before, has preached this on the podcast before about the customer journey. So I would love to hear for your perspective, whether it was a takeaway from the panel with MarTech and Goldfish Swim School, or just in your own perspective, best practices for actually mapping the customer journey experience in a franchise. Because as you mentioned, you not only have your national brand, but you do have the franchisees to think about in their local markets.
Definitely. For us, you know, we're always saying we need to get into our customers' shoes in a sense, because with repair, it's a matter of, you know, either they're broken down on the side of the road and they're needing someone right then and there, or they're noticing an issue like their check engine light is on, or they're just needing their general maintenance. So how do we reach that person? What are they thinking about? What are the steps that they're going through? And that's where I think it takes, you know, part of the last topic of our takeaways, where we're thinking about our customers' persona, we're thinking about, you know, who they are, what they are, because you want to start building your brand awareness from there. And then when they need you, you're the first person they think of. And what does that journey look like? So for us, it's most likely that they're Googling, you know, transmission repair near me. So you want to make sure that you're showing up digitally, but also you want to make sure that you're doing those traditional touch points of, is it a, you know, outside sales marketing program? Is it, you know, a direct mail piece that has their maintenance in there, or setting them maintenance reminders? So you have to constantly think of, what does that look like for your customer, and break that down based on, you know, locally, what are they doing? Some markets, Yelp for us works great. Some markets it doesn't. You know, what does that look like? Is that customer more digital, or are they more in a traditional market? Does the penny saver work better? You know, what does that look like? And so we're always looking at that. And with our franchisees, we try to break that down for them as best as possible. And for us, our franchisees control their marketing 100%. So we're here to give them guidance and, you know, give them some options, give them vendors to work with, but also we encourage them to look locally and see, like, what does that look like? Is your high school or a semi-pro team really big in your community? It might be good to do some brand awareness marketing with them. You know, what does that look like? And so that's something that we always try to break down that journey by the local level, and then build brand awareness by the national level.
Yeah. So in our case, you know, when I came on board to this company about 4 years ago, one of the first things that I wanted to learn was the customer journey. In our model, in the franchisee model, the design consultant member of the team actually goes into the home. So that's part of the journey, right? The lead comes in, they're called by someone in inside sales, the appointment is booked, the designer goes into the home, and they have this experience with the customer, looking at their kitchen or bathroom that they want to remodel, looking at all the color options and the material options, measuring, you know, if they get that far along in the conversation, and hopefully signing a contract on the spot, if not shortly after. And what it does is it allows us to use our design consultants as investigators for us, right? What happened when you went in the home? What are the kind of questions that this customer asked? What, you know, and delve a little bit deeper, you know, to understand how they got to us. And the inside salesperson is tasked with doing that as well, right? Asking the questions about where they heard about us and all of that. But when I came on board, I wanted to take it further. So we did qual board research, where we did qualitative research to really understand on an online platform and have a conversation with our customers to understand their journey as it relates to their home remodeling process. When they decide they want to do their kitchen or bathroom, what's next or what's first, right? Do they start going online and looking at different options? Yes, of course they do. And they'll look at the big box customers like the Home Depot and the Lowe's, and they'll look at the Granit yard down the street, you know, that they Google online, because they usually always Google for granite or quartz, right? Because that's typically the materials that they want for their countertops. And then they ultimately get to us in that process, in that search as well. But then what happens next? And then what happens next, right? So in the qualitative research that we did, we were able to really hone down on not only how they started their journey, where we were in their decision-making process, were we the first, the second, the last, how they narrowed it down, what they were looking for, what sparked their interest, what was important to them. That was the other thing, is, you know, understanding this customer, the way that we learned in the MarTech session, you know, was really great, because it also helped us identify what are the pain points this customer has. Do they stress about the fact that when they think about remodeling their kitchen or bathroom, that they automatically go to, particularly if they're a couple with children, I'm going to be out of a kitchen for a month, or you know, this could take 6 months depending on the extent of the project. And our particular model is really about getting in and out, because our proprietary product allows us to, on a countertop, go over top in existing structures. What does that mean? We could do a kitchen in a day or two, right? So it removes the stress of the of that remodeling disaster, of being out of your kitchen for a month, of the dust and the mess all over the place. And so it's really about, as they said, learning that customer, using your tools to get them in their journey and to figure out how you're going to map it comes from research, consumer studies, using our design consultants as a methodology to talk to that customer and find out what their journey was so we could start building this puzzle, you know, putting all the pieces of the puzzle together, and working with our operations and sales teams, because when you do that and you integrate on the corporate level and all have that conversation, you can start seeing the journey and then figuring out the loopholes or the little holes that you have to plug to start deciding what the strategies are going to be and what the tactics are going to be to figure out that entire journey, right? And to touch that customer. Okay.
I completely agree with that too, because as marketers, I think that a lot of times we come up with these brilliant ideas that we're like, oh, this is amazing, it will work so well, but we don't necessarily think about the implementation. And so working with your franchisee directly, as well as your outside sales representatives, that really helps, because it makes us realize that, oh, this idea that we had, that maybe it's them physically handing out flyers, might reach a lot of people, but do they have the manpower? Do they have the ability to do that? Or we wanted to offer pickup and drop off services during COVID for our vehicles. Do we have the manpower? Yes, it would be a great marketing message, but is it possible at the local level? And so I think that's really big, is when you're mapping out this journey and your, touch points, how does that look? And does that actually work for the franchisee who's actually going to be doing it?
Correct.
Yeah. It's really interesting because you're in different industries, obviously home services and automotive, but you're also in like one of the industries that's the biggest decision people will ever make. So it's so intimate. You have a house and you have a car, the number one and number two purchase that any person will make in their lifetime. And for you, when you're mapping the customer journey, you are thinking, okay, this is the stressor. How can I eliminate that? And, Amanda, you highlighted if they're on the road, they're going to go Google and I'm going to start my customer journey sprouting from that journey. Or Vanessa, you highlighted that, for the home services, you get referrals, you get recommendations from the women, because it's, as we said, primary decision makers are the women in these design choices. So it's really interesting how different customer journeys sprout obviously from different industries, but it's a little bit of overlap because you do have like that structure and that high value and high emotion attached to what you're doing.
Definitely. Yeah. Like I've said before, transmission repair is not exciting. And it's actually something that people get really upset about because it costs $3,000 or more, and it's a big decision to make. And so for us, we have to work on building that trust with that customer. So that way they trust us. I think also, it kind of goes hand in hand with the customer's experience, what the whole conference was about, at the location that they're getting it done.
And also in our case, home remodeling became a very important industry during the pandemic.
Yeah.
More and more money was spent on home remodeling during the pandemic, I think, than I wouldn't say any other time before that, but we really did see a surge in spending and people really wanting to remodel their kitchens and bathrooms. Why? Because they were stuck at home. They weren't spending money on vacations or on going out to dinner or an entertainment because they couldn't do it. And so now they're looking at this kitchen and bathroom that they always thought, one day when I save up enough money, I'm going to do this. And then all of a sudden they were sitting at home looking at it like, oh, this kitchen, I can't stand it anymore. And oh, guess what? I have this money because I'm not spending it on other things. So because they were sitting at home more, then we had to kind of relook at the customer journey a little bit, because it's like, now what are they doing sitting at home? What are they thinking? How are they absorbing their information? How are they doing their research? How important is it to them? And are they getting to the decision making faster because they have nothing else to do? So sort of, and right, because they're sitting at home and they're desperate to get that kitchen done because they just can't stand to look at it anymore. And so there was someone that made a comment during the conference about, especially in today's day and age with technology always evolving, that we have no choice but to consistently look at our customer and customer journey, because the journey can pivot depending on what's happening in the world, depending on what nuances are now affecting them, and depending on how technology is evolving. And so as marketers, it becomes our job to always be ahead of that change and ahead of that curve, because it's going to happen more frequently as we move to the future.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I think you hit the nail on the head. Like we as, people in the franchising industry can't expect the customer journey to be, a set it and forget it thing, because it evolves with, as you said, what's happening in the world as you grow, etc. So that's a really interesting point. And we did actually have a futurist open up the second day speaker, Chris Riddell. He gave his assessment on the state of the world and the technology with that same message that everything's evolving. So essentially you have to as well. So that brings us to actually the next question, all about the future. So what would you say are some trends or predictions for the customer experience going to 22, 23 and beyond? What do you see customers really wanting in your industries?
Well, we just did a color survey, a color trend survey, and we're looking at that data right now to understand, what colors are trending and what products are, customers want. And it's kind of like hitting the nail on the head of what we know, because we look at the sales data and we're like, oh yeah, more whites and grays, more marble patterns, a little bit more modern or contemporary. Kind of more of a streamlined approach seems to be where colors and products are trending, which also aligns with what industry news is saying in the home remodeling space. But one of the things that I've been preaching to my franchisees since the day I always say the day I landed on Plymouth Rock there, is that you have to always keep your eye on the next audience. So our audience has typically been the empty nester, right? Or your 50 something plus and above. And I've been tooting the horn up, but what about the millennial? And what about the millennial? Because they may not at that time be the audience that you either want or you think is your audience today. Maybe they don't have the disposable income, but guess what? As the years go on and the older audience ages out, right? You've got to replace them. And the millennials eventually will they're already older and they already have families and they're already remodeling their homes and they have the disposable income. So you kind of have, while you're looking to the future, you also have to look at the past. I always tell them, building historical data by the integrated marketing that you're doing in your local marketing is key, because you're building the data that's going to help you make the decisions for the future. When you look back at what you did the year before and the year before that, and you see what worked and didn't work, that helps pave the way for the future. And you can implement the tried and true things that always work. And it gives you the time and the leverage to look at new things. But when you consider your audience, while this is your sweet spot here in terms of your older audience, you have to figure out a way how to nurture those younger guys into the fold and get them to be brand loyalists and help them to understand why the older generation thinks you're great, right? Because eventually they're going to get there too. And it takes time to nurture that. So, and to get them on board. So how do you do that? Do you start delving into media that's targeting a little bit of a younger audience? We tried it on the corporate level by using influencers to communicate our brand difference, right? A younger couple from the Midwest that have young children. They have a huge following on social. They have a great program as influencers that just live their life every day, dealing with challenges that they deal with as millennials. And they had an installation with our product and they tooted our horn. So that was great. And there's more of that can be done on the local level, and other media and tactics that you have to look at that target specifically that audience, touch them in the way that appeals to them, and start bringing them into the fold. So whenever we look towards the future in our group, that's always my advice. Look towards the future. Use the past as a way to pave the way for yourself, because sometimes things are tried and true and good to do and repeat. And then look for the nuances, test, and also start looking at a new audience. because you can't negate the fact that eventually an audience will age out and you've got to replace them, right?
Completely agree, because we're the same way. Back in December and January, we did a nationwide customer survey trying to find out, what are customers expecting their experience to be at an automotive repair shop or a window tinting shop. What do they want that experience to be, and how do they expect the phone to be answered? Do they prefer to be communicated through more digital aspects like messaging or text messaging versus a phone call? Do they like to be followed up with after a repair? Things like that. Because what we started to see was, because of everything that's been coming down the pipeline with labor shortages and parts shortages, as well as pricing increase, we were seeing a lot more negative reviews coming through based on that. And so we wanted to get ahead of the curve and find out what was exactly the customer wanting and how can we pivot. And we did have at our night conference with our franchisees in February, we presented those results, as well as went into an in-depth customer service training class. So that way we could help the franchisees, because ultimately it goes down to what's their experience at the local level. And that was something that we learned, that we needed to bring back our referral program, and we needed to learn on different aspects of, okay, what can we do now? What can we do in 6 months? And what can we do, in a year or two? What does it look like? And obviously then with all that, you have to get your franchisees buy-in, because they're the ones who are running it on the local level. So it's great. You can come up with this perfect program. A few years ago, I tried to come up with an influencer program, or essentially like what Lululemon has brand ambassadors. Try to come up with that program. Our franchisees did not touch it. But now, I have franchisees asking about it. So I'm dusting off an old program saying, well, here's what I did for you guys a few years ago. So that was a little bit too ahead of the curve. But, trying to look at things like that and then build that plan out. Our customer survey, we did it with people who are current customers, as well as people who are not even customers with us. And we did that through Facebook. And I highly suggest that. It did not take a lot of money, but it helped us learn a lot. And it also helped solidify everything that we've been telling our franchisees and showing it, in their face of, this is what your customer is saying. You need to be doing these things, because if you're not, you're going to be left behind. And so I think that's the biggest thing, is just starting there, starting with an easy 5 to 10 question survey that will take them 2 seconds. Try to steer the questions almost in a way by having them just select something versus having them enter in, write their experience. That is always easy. And again, I can't speak more highly about it. Because that ultimately gives you the best guidance into where to plan for your future.
Absolutely. I think it's really interesting that the point being, like, the customer persona shifts just as the customer journey shifts, and we have to look retrospectively as well as ahead into how we can, best situate our companies given what's going on in the world at that time, as well as what we predict is happening. I know one of the key sessions on the first day was about, the economy and the economist predictions around that. So making sure that our industries and companies are set up for success in that. So I think that's a really interesting point. We did touch upon a little bit about this throughout today's panel discussion, but our last question actually revolves around data, which both of you are diving into quite regularly, as well as brand loyalty to get customers that not only use you for the first time, but refer as well as come back and so on. So I'd love to get your tips on how you both utilize data, and also how you get that data on your customers to get loyal customers time and time again.
So when I was at the conference last week, and we were in the little the vendor market room, I was going around meeting with different vendors, and I sat down with a young lady, and she was telling me about the new tool and technology to make it easier for franchisees to use to look at their data and their programs, their digital programs. And it was the conversation was all about obviously the tool and how to use it. And I said to her, this is great, and I actually think it's a really cool thing. What I'm finding is that, now in today's digital age, there's so many different digital tools and, programs and paid advertising and all ways to monitor it and bring it all into a dashboard and have a one-click approach to managing your business through a dashboard. And that's great, but I feel like it starts to get confusing and convoluted. It's like, how many tools can you have and integrate into a one main dashboard, or you hope that they all integrate together, so it makes it easier to use them all under one umbrella. That is actually going to be an advantage and helpful to the franchisees, not that it's going to dissuade them, because it's going to be so overwhelming, especially for the older ones, that they're going to be like, you know what, it's just too much technology. I'm not even going to touch it. Just let me get my leads and call it a day and get through my process, right? So, and the other part of that is, how do we, once we get them to use this, let's say, how do we get them to understand the data? Because me, with my almost 30 years of marketing experience, right, on the ad agency side and mostly on the client side now, even I struggle with, which is why I have a VP of digital marketing, thank God, and he's brilliant. But even I struggle with, okay, what does this stuff mean? Like, what is this data telling me? How do I read it? What is the story that it's saying? And then how do I use it to make a decision that's either right for my franchisees? But more importantly, how do I teach them how to use their analytics and their data to make decisions about their business and about how they do their marketing and how they plan tactics that are going to drive brand loyalty and grow lifetime customers, right? So for me, that's the conversation that is not being had enough, right? How do you teach them? And I tell this to my VP of digital marketing too. It's like, okay, great. We have our quarterly calls with our franchisees. As a franchisor, we do system updates. We talk about the data. We talk about how leads have grown, but we never really talk about how to teach them to read that data on the local level and to unless they're dependent on a digital marketing partner, which I always recommend. It's like, don't try to go at this on your own. If you're going to hire someone, hire a digital marketing partner. We'll help you vet them. We'll help, teach them the brand and make sure that they're feeding you this information in a way that helps you make decisions. But aside from that, the bad part of even that recommendation is that you're almost making them reliant on an outside party to drive information to them in the way that company is going to make them look good and going to be like, oh yeah, we're doing our job and we're doing this good. This is what the data says. So we have to do a better job of helping educate the franchisees on how to read that data themselves, how to understand the information that they're being given through their tools and even by an outside vendor, to make sure that they know that the information they're getting is valid, but that they're using it in the right way to make the right kind of decisions to get to their customers, or to pivot what they're doing quickly, right? Because the beauty of digital marketing is that you can make decisions in real time, so you're not bleeding money, and you can be reactive to things that are not working and make those changes. And that's the beauty of analytics and data, so that if it tells you that story, you can react to it and make the change that you need to make. But if someone doesn't understand how to look at that data, they're going to sit and let that money bleed, because they're not, it's almost like it might as well be a print ad that has to run for 6 months before you know if it actually has driven a lead, right? And we don't necessarily need to do that anymore. That might be part of the mix, but some of this digital stuff that is happening right now, you can stop that bleeding faster, right? And make a pivot and then analyze it and use the data to understand if that pivot is working too. So I think for me, that's the key in moving forward in a digital technology world. Great that you learn what the tool is. Great that there's all these wonderful new tools to help you do your business more easily. But make sure you understand the information that tool is giving you and that data, and how to use it to drive your brand loyalty and your lifetime customers.
Definitely. We also try to help educate our franchisees on looking at their data, looking at their dashboards for their digital marketing programs, looking at their Google Insights, their Facebook Insights. But I will tell you, our franchisees, a lot of times they just don't do it, just because they're like, I already have way too much other things going on. I don't have the time to sit down and focus on that. So for us, we don't have a product that our franchisees have to buy from us. So we took that as, what, we really need to focus on the support services that we're giving our franchisees. So we help our franchisees by analyzing that data a lot of times for them. So we look at, all of their data that's coming through for Google, Facebook, their point of sale, their digital marketing programs, and then we all compare it to each other. A lot of times this is done by hand or by the dashboards that our partners provide, but that's where we compare the locations to each other, to help come up with this is how much your cost per lead ideally should be. Obviously, it depends on your market, but, metrics for them to look at and be able to keep an eye out themselves as well as us for them. A lot of times we're behind the scenes talking to the vendors that they're working with saying, hey, this is a really bad month. What's going on? This is not what their normal performance is or what our average performance is nationwide. So we're always analyzing that data, but also looking at, leaning on your vendor partner relationships. Like with us, we are just in the process of doing a study on all of our franchisees, Google My Business data insights, and looking at their phone call action clicks as well as their website clicks, their views. What does that look like, and what is a good result versus a bad result? In our system, it may look good, but compared to a competitor or just the industry average, is that good or not? And I think that's something that relying on your vendors that you're working with can really help, as well as getting some third-party data in on that can really help you as well.
This is why I never mute myself, because then I just start talking on mute. But you both brought up really interesting and great points, is that you have data that drives you forward at the head office as well as at the franchisee level. While it's important for both to get the data, utilizing it is a different question, and where you get that source data from as well. So there's, and Vanessa, you said it, that vendor hall was filled with probably 30 out of 60 vendors that do very similar things. So really choosing your vendor partners and those that are going to be loyal to and grow with you, not only as you grow, but as their products evolves, is a really important takeaway as well from that. So before, we close it out, I did want to open it up to you both, and, get your final conclusions and takeaways from the conference.
I thought it was great. I mean, I love anytime Franchise Update does a conference, and also IFA, but I just think that the content that they always bring is amazing, and it helps you think of things that, maybe you haven't done this in a while, helps you dust off something that you left on the shelf, or it also helps move you forward. So I thought it was great. And this time we also had our ops, our chief operating officer come, as well as our CEO. And so it was great that we were able to all three come at it with a different perspective and come together and talk about how are we going to implement some of these things that we talked about, as well as some things that inspired us. So I love any time that I know this conference kind of morphed into from 3 to 1, but yeah, I thought it was great. And, I loved the fact that they focused on the customer experience, because I think that oftentimes gets forgotten about.
I agree. I mean, I think, as I said before, it was great to get back out. I felt like I've been in a cave for a while. It's like, all of a sudden I felt like a celebrity. Oh, there's Vanessa. And it was the first time I'd ever been to actually this particular conference. it was good to hear some of the standards. It was great to have some new takeaways, as I mentioned, with mapping the customer journey. It was great to hear that I'm not alone, as I mentioned earlier, on things that that either we're challenged with or we're confronted with on the day-to-day. It was nice for my VP digital marketing and I to get on the road, get out of our usual environment, and be able to brainstorm things outside of the office. And I felt like it was like a breath of fresh air, and to be around a different group of people, to learn new things, right? And also meet new folks, like meeting Amanda the first night was really great. And we kept, running into each other throughout the conference. So it was nice to be back in a conference environment. I thought it was well done. The keynote speeches were great. The sessions were really good too. And I walked away with a lot of things that I was able to bring back to the team and say, get ready, I've got some new stuff for you. So here we go.
Yeah, I was also slacking my coordinators and being like, get ready. I want you to start thinking about, what's going on. And especially, they've only been with us for about a year and a half, our two coordinators. And so I was like, I want you to start yourself thinking about our customers' journey and our persona, because I want us to get together and see about, hey, do they have a different perspective than maybe I do, or our other executives or our franchisees? So I loved it. And yeah, the whole time I was annoying them with little things of, hey, what about this? What about that?
Actually, we have a franchisee conference coming up now in July, the first one in over 2 years since the pandemic. So I was actually trying to figure out a way. We have a pretty packed schedule. It's only a day and a half, but trying to figure out a way if I could implement like a little round table to do a similar exercise like the customer journey mapping that we did with the MarTech group, and kind of, or at least getting them into the process of looking at their customer in terms of a personality. So I don't know that we're going to be able to squeeze it in for the conference, but I may do it as an interactive webinar. As one of the things I told Jason, who was my team member that was there with me. It's like, I really like this. I like this exercise. And I find that the more that we get franchisees engaged in the process of building something, that then they can use on the local level, the more apt they are to use it. Right. So that's a project on deck for us now.
Absolutely. That's great. And I also I think the whole session ended on a great, another roundtable activity. It was at the session led by Jason Young from Southwest Airlines. I will say his speech wasn't particularly franchise related, but because it was like heavy Southwest analogy, but the overall sentiment about customer first and thinking about the customer was, and then the activities that we led, where we all had to come up with ideas on how to make sure we're doing that, was a lot of fun. In our table, led with Diane Davis from Just Between Friends, highlighted things about just listening to your franchisees, listening to what they need, listening to the customer. And that seems like really simple, and especially compared to the Yonut kid, who was like the most energetic person I think I've ever seen. But it was really great to kind of just, like we said, get back to basics, think of the customers, and really get energized with new ideas.
Great.
Excellent. Well, as we close out, just wanted to, reintroduce myself as well as Promo Republic. We are the intelligent local marketing platform that helps franchises uncover growth opportunities through data points. We have over 300 in our platform. So that's a little bit about what we do. If you're interested, you could contact us. And we have some amazing customers all in the franchise space that we work with. So you can always reach out. But more importantly, a huge thank you to Amanda Maquet as well as Vanessa Conde for taking the time out of your day to share your learnings with us. And if you want to connect, you can scan their QR codes here to get their LinkedIns.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And I think that's it. So thank you so much for your time today. And we look forward to staying in touch. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.